I'm here and I'm on the journey, so let's do it.
I love it. Great to meet you, Tyler. Thank you for taking a minute out for the show today.
My pleasure. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Yes, sir. So before we get into your good work, I want to know this. 6 years ago, this pandemic was changing the world. How did you get through it, and how did it change you?
Oh, I have to say, and I'll say this with a little bit of an asterisk, that COVID was probably the best thing for me and
Right.
my business.
Yeah.
So it blew up our business. It completely changed how we focused on delivering value. It changed our culture model. We went obviously office to in home. We've never gone back. We're a full remote team all across the country. I got a dog that changed my life as well. And I really leaned in on podcasting. And all of a sudden, everyone was available. So I did 100 podcasts in 11 months at the
Wow.
beginning of COVID and met more people than I met the 5 years prior. And it
Wow.
completely changed my trajectory.
Podcasting's wonderful. It's such a wonderful place to
Yes.
exchange ideas and have a level of communication. It's wonderful. Um,
And for me, it really taught me and gave me the opportunity to practice being curious and embrace where that what that could be in because the non-curious podcast host, not a great podcast host. But I also started to realize that, you know what? Curious podcast Tyler could probably give some lessons to not so curious leader Tyler.
yeah.
And that was also through my COVID journey.
So, along with podcasting, you're an author, you're a speaker, you're a CEO, you're a business leader. But if we wanted to synthesize everything for a 13-year-old brain at career day at a school, how do you explain what you do on a daily basis?
What a fabulous way to ask that question. Hmm. I work with the people around me to create bigger things than if we did it on our own.
Okay. So, just the definition of teamwork, like a good sports team.
Fundamentally, it's coordinating, aligning with, inspiring, taking direction from, but ultimately reaching bigger and better mountains, higher mountains and better outcomes because we're a group of people. And we work very hard to move in the same direction because that is a lot harder than you might think at 13 years old.
So, what did you want to be at that age? What was your dream job?
Oh, that's easy. I wanted to be a pilot.
Okay. Do you fly?
I was in grade 6 and my mom still has it. I want what I want to be when I grow up, grade 5, and it's I want to be a pilot. And I went on that journey. I became a pilot. I moved to Western Canada to fly. And then right after that, 9/11 happened. And it would be like getting your pilot's job right before COVID happened. And there was no jobs, and the market just completely disappeared. That's the cycle of the ups and downs of the aviation industry, pun intended. But I found myself in Western Canada. I fell in love with the people. I fell in love with the entrepreneurial energy that is Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and Western Canada in general. And I stayed. I originally grew up in Montreal, Quebec, so Eastern Canada to Western Canada.
So talk to me a little bit about who's been um like inspirational forces in your life to find your footing, to find where you're at.
Oh, it's been a series of leaders, actually. I had a really interesting opportunity in my late 20s. Joe, you're old enough. Do you remember American Gladiators, that
Oh,
show?
oh yeah.
So I lived with Thunder in LA
Wow.
for a year. And
Wow.
he ran a fitness and nutrition business that he had developed through working with Gold's Gym International. And I met him through a series of events when I was working in the fitness industry. I have a science background. So when I moved to Alberta, I worked as a personal trainer when that was a very new thing in the world, when it wasn't just rich people getting personal trainers anymore. It started to become everybody. And I met Thunder, and Billy Smith was his name. And he probably was, I grew up with strong male role models and that type of thing. He was the first, business role model I had where I got to work in a very entrepreneurial space. I moved down to Northridge. I lived at I worked at Gold's Gym in Venice Beach, running the nutrition center for a while, but I had an experience to live with this guy who honestly probably struggled from an entrepreneurial perspective, but just was so passionate about helping people. And it was the first moment in my life that I was like, oh, here's a whole other different formula of how to live and how to be a leader in the world of like people and teams, but also putting something out there that helps people. And I lived with him for about a year, and I would say it easily changed the trajectory of my life in terms of just. And also, I lived in LA, which is a weird ride on its
Yeah.
to itself. I think
Uh-huh.
everyone should do it. What is it? Move there while you're curious, but leave before it makes you too jaded. I think New York has a joke like that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I lived with Thunder from American Gladiators in LA and kind of started my journey into business and really understanding how to create value for people, for businesses. And, in hindsight, it makes sense that it got me where I was. But at the time, I was 28, 29, kind of big eyed and bushy tailed in LA. So it was kind of a wild journey.
So talk to me about bit like growing up. What were some of the seeds that were planted from family early on and friends that have allowed you to have the success, to have this vision, to have this energy to do the work that you're doing that's not easy?
Fair enough. I think the best way to describe it is I grew up on a farm. I was a farm kid.
Okay.
So resilience, problem solving, your worth was tied to how much work you could do, which that had some own has problematic in its own way. But we're going to take on the lessons that were learned on a strong suit. Growing up in an environment where if you had a problem in front of you, you had to figure it out. No one was coming to help you. And then sometimes you didn't really want to ask your dad to help you because that might be a failure. You might want to figure that out on your own before you make that call. If you get stuck in the mud or you break something, you learn how to fix it. And you also learn that I didn't grow up in a 40-hour work week, but I also had this really cool variable that my dad didn't go away to work. He went outside in the yard. So as of 5, 6 years old, I would go with my dad and his uncle and his brothers, which are my uncles, and work with these guys in an environment that, I kind of wasn't qualified to be in, but I was a farm kid. So you just tagged along. The work ethic, the resilience, the grit that it teaches you, because not all jobs were glamorous on the farm. I would say most of them were not glamorous. But there was always a cooler job. I could always do better. And then I'd get to drive the tractor or I'd get to drive the combine, which got me into flying because it was just the next cool thing. So there
Yeah.
was always an ability for me to get up the ladder, if you will, to do the better, cooler thing, the more value I created, or the harder I worked, or the better I did something. So I really learned that cycle of events of like effort equals output and output equals benefit and that equals growth. And, in hindsight, it makes sense. At the time, it was just navigating the world that I grew up in, but I wouldn't trade it for the world, Joe. I couldn't move away fast enough, but about 3 years ago, my wife and I bought a farm about an hour outside of the city where we live. So my dad finds it endlessly amusing that I've come full circle on my journey.
So talk to me a little bit about what was the first podcast that you that you loved, that you fell in love with, that you listened to as a podcaster? Did you have that moment where there was one that you couldn't get enough of?
I don't think so. Obviously, I think Joe Rogan played a part because I was like, Joe Rogan, like, come on, that's the guy from Fear Factor.
Yeah.
And then I had a couple of buddies that were big advocates of it. So I started listening a little bit. And then there was the armchair experts with Dax Shepard. Then I listened to that one for a while. Then I got into a lot of health ones and being a health and fitness guy. And there were so many cool rabbit holes that I could go down. So I wouldn't say it was one. I discovered the power of audio content. I also fell in love with audiobooks around the same time. My wife is an aggressive reader, the 60 book a year kind of person. And I was reading 2 books a year. I was like, these numbers aren't going to stand.
Yeah.
We're very competitive in a very healthy way. So I started consuming audio content and I fell in love with it in terms of my ability to maximize the amount of information I could absorb while also doing other things. The multitasker in me, the farm kid who's always got to be busy, also loved consuming content. And then a friend of mine dared me once, or I said I should start a podcast, and he called my bluff. He showed up with the microphone and the M box and all the gear at the time when we were in person back in 2018, and said, "I dare you, and I'll edit for you." And I did 3 podcasts right away with people that I knew, and walked away going, "Holy heck! I actually didn't really know those people. I learned
Yeah.
so much." So
Yes.
it was indirect of really appreciating the audio format, and then really falling in love with those first 3 conversations. And I was kind of hooked, Joe, after that.
That's wonderful. So what about books as an author? What were the books growing up that really kind of swayed you, that influenced the way that you approach the page?
I actually wasn't much of a reader growing up. I was like forced to read. I'll be honest, when I was in college, I was taking sciences and I didn't want to spend time and energy. Maybe I'm really ratting myself out here as I look around the room. I'm ratting myself out here. I would pay people to write my English papers for me
Yeah.
because I was like, physics, chemistry, more important, and work is more important. I can outsource. That was also, I think, my journey to being a leader and a business owner, but that's another story.
Yeah.
And I'd outsource those jobs. And I never was much of a reader, never fell in love with it. Wrote book reports on books that I'd never even read because I had someone do it for me. And as I evolved over time, and I read a lot of nonfiction. I read a lot of business books. But I would say what really inspired me to write the book that I wrote, and wrote it in the way that it has a narrative, it has a journey arc. It was based a lot in, like, you build out your storyline, you build out good storytelling. I read a lot of Joseph Campbell over the years, and I read a lot of fiction. So I really fell in love in probably the last 10 years with the art of a good story well told. So that helped me to write this book to be, yes, I focused on business because you got to land it somewhere. But ultimately, I still wanted a story that the reader could go on. And that came from reading fiction that didn't really start for me until the last kind of 8 or 9 years. Again, inspired by my wife.
So talk to me a little bit about health. Did you have a scare? Did you see somebody in your life that maybe spooked you, that made you want to be more
Mm,
focused on health?
question.
How did that happen for you?
I was a chunky kid, Joe.
Okay.
And a chunky kid watching too many Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, like you got to look like this. Like you got like I wouldn't say it was the healthiest reasons and motivations, but I was younger. It was like buy the York barbell sets and work in your room, those plastic ones that had the sand in them with the bar. And so I got my first weight training set when I was 13. All for the wrong reasons. It wasn't being healthy is not that hard, but wanting to look all jacked at the beach, that's a whole other journey. So I spent a lot of my early years, I would say, beating myself up in the gym and overtraining. And over time and living in LA and getting exposed to what I would say is more of a narcissistic side to health and fitness, and then evolving that to where I am today to be strong, to be healthy, to have good joint health, but also to I was kind of chunky and I didn't want to be a fat kid. So that was my initial motivation. But
Yeah.
over the years, it's evolved into just being able to live the life I want to live. And luckily, I'd say I built, no matter how busy I am, it never slips off the schedule because it's become a healthy habit that's almost non-negotiable. And I now can tie it. No, if I don't do anything for a couple days, like just move, I can feel the mental health. I can feel my energy. It's a direct cause and effect now. But I laid that groundwork when I was younger, maybe not for the right reasons, but I created the habit that's carried me in the long run.
Yeah. So what gets you up every day? What's the energy to do all of these things that you do at a high level, take care of your soul, your family? What is that energy, that vision for you every day?
For me, the fundamental root of all of it is, do I believe that there's an incremental opportunity to be better directly correlated to my effort? If I learn a little bit more, can I do something better than I did before? Whether it's my hobbies, whether it's anything about my life, that's been my driver. And I only like hobbies where I'm like, oh, effort equals output. I like work where I can go, oh, if I do this, I can see an outcome that I can drive. It's also why I run my own business. It's also why I'm an entrepreneur and I also still have solo projects. They fill me up and it gives me that energy, that sense of my contribution equals an outcome that I can point to. I can really see the impact I'm having on the world around me. When I start to feel like the world around me has a greater impact on me than I do, that's when I can lose some energy. That's where I sometimes have to reset and make sure I'm keeping a balance when we all wake up and go, oh, what part of AI is going to disrupt my world today? I think a lot of us as humans are dealing with that. I've now leaned in on technology to at least feel like I've got a hand in that race. But I also keep hobbies and I keep friends around where my direct investment gives me direct benefit and helps me balance that out. But I do have to watch it. If I do feel like I'm losing agency or losing ability to impact the world around me, my energy levels can drop, Joe. I wouldn't say depressed, but I can definitely get a little bit less enthusiastic to jump out of bed in the morning if I don't watch it.
So, the one thing that can change the trajectory of our lives, along with having inspirational folks around us, is one act of random kindness, something that someone does that's nice, that changes things. What's been the nicest thing that someone's done for you?
Giving me grace after I totally blew it. And I can think of multiple times in my life, but it's the same story. When I was younger, grew up in a small town, probably got involved in some things that were maybe not looked upon well in the town, some nefarious behavior at a 16, 17 years old. And in a small town, when you do something that like, crack up your car or drink too much or whatever, everybody knows in 5 minutes. That's what small town looks like. And I remember one specific incident that I won't get into, and I was at my dad's farm, and it really set the tone for me on what grace can look like. And this individual showed up, and I kind of hung my head, like he was there to see my dad. And when you live in a farming community, people come and go all the time. Everyone's stopping in because they all do work for each other. It's just how a small farming community works. And I kind of hung my head and just was like, I kind of screwed up and I knew it, so I'm just going to play small here. And he got in his truck to leave, and he stopped and he got out of his truck and he walked back and he said, "Hey, just so you know, we've all effed up. And you never have to hang your head around me because clearly you get it. So we're good. So I just want you to know, like, none of that. That's done. We're good."
Yeah.
And through the course of my life, I've had different instances of that, and I've had the opportunity to do that for others. And it's amazing when you do it for someone else, how much it comes back tenfold on you in terms of how you relook at the world. So it's a series of those moments, but it's giving people grace when maybe at first you don't think they deserve it or you don't think you've earned it yourself, but it shows up anyways. And those doors can just swing wide open from what felt like a really dark pit in 1 minute. It can be like, oh, wow, hope shows up the next.
So, Tyler, if you had a dream tonight, ran into the 18-year-old version of you, and there was a film projector next to that young version, and you
Yep.
went up and you clicked play, and it was a 60-second highlight reel of this life you've lived, would that young version of you believe that your life turned out this way?
Would that 18-year-old version believe my life turned out that way?
Yeah.
Oh, No, I think he'd spend too much time trying to be macho about it and not really catch the message.
Gotcha. Would
I
you
think his head would still be in his ass, Joe.
would you give any advice?
I would, but he wouldn't take it anyways.
Yeah.
For life to be valuable, it doesn't have to be hard, is the advice I would give him.
Yeah, that's
Because when I
awesome.
shifted that belief in my life, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, through some experiences and some coaching and some external references, it took about a year, but things started to get better, but felt easier. 18-year-old me to 48-year-old me always believed that if it wasn't hard, it wasn't valuable. And it's kind of where I grew up. And I can see where that was kind of almost ingrained into my DNA. But once I started to lighten up a bit, things actually got better and felt easier. But 18-year-old me wouldn't have bought that story anyways.
So, of everything that you've accomplished, everything you've overcome and evolved to, what are you ultimately the happiest about, the proudest of?
The quality of the relationships in my life. I have more friends and I have deeper quality relationships with multiple people from different angles, men, women, professionals, non like blue collar, white collar, like any way you want to describe it. I have a really diverse cross section or cohort, if you will, gaggle of people in my life that I have deep, meaningful relations with that I spend time. Like if you've heard the four burner analogy, we put a lot of gas into the work burner. And then so there's the health burner, the family burner, and the friends and community burner. In the last 5 or 6 years, I think so specifically, I put a little bit more balance in terms of where the heat goes on those burners.
Yeah.
And the one I think I've earned the most, I had some really good friends. Now I have more of them. And it's not a volume game, but the quality and depth of those relationships and the ability to build new relationships kind of lets me know I'm putting out there into the world a centered version of who I am. Because it's not friends with everybody, but when you meet someone, you're like, oh, okay, this works here. There's something going on here. I think it's they're centered who they are, and I'm a little more centered who I am, and it's showing up in deeper quality relationships. And that benefits me in business. That benefits me across the board. That's not a soft skill. I don't think it's actually very tangible.
Well, I'm a Libra, so you're preaching to the choir there,
Nice,
with
good.
the whole balance thing. So at the end of the day, Tyler, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, listeners, readers, in all of these different areas of your life, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Joe, you're hitting hard right early here in the first thing in the morning.
That's right.
um, the perception from the outside, and I think the lines, the amount of energy I have and the discipline I have to stick with things and follow through, because I believe that version of myself. You know, those days when you start to drift and you're like, huh, this is not how I see myself. I
Yeah.
see myself who operates that way. And it's funny. I'll be candid. I put a lot of out in the world around the value of curiosity and being open and I've my current season, my new podcast, the theme is the risk of certainty and how that trap imprisons leaders. And sometimes I'll read my newsletter that I've contributed to, but I have a really good team that contributes to it. And I'll be like, shit, Joe, I didn't act like that today.
Yeah.
I wasn't that curious. I was a bit directive in the meeting. I wasn't like, hey, I wonder what this would be like if we thought about it. So I think the perception is, wow, that curious side of me is the brand I put out there and really what I believe in. And the inside version is I don't always nail it. I think there's a balance between those two things where someone will say, oh, that must be easy for you because you're always curious. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I practice at being curious, but I still slip because that's one thing I love about that as a trait, as a behavior, as a choice is it's not always a 10 out of 10, but you can always get more curious in 5 minutes from now than I was 5 minutes ago. So I think it's the wrestling of what I put out there to the world and how I want to show up to the fact that reality hits me and I don't always hit it. I don't always make it there.
So, speaking of curiosity and adventure, if you could get into a time machine and go back in time and see one event in human history, where are you going to go? Or you could go in the future and see what's going on. I wouldn't recommend it. The like
Oh yeah, I know it feels that's when you materialize into a wasteland of what the hell went wrong.
exactly.
Yeah, we've all watched those time travel movies. The future is
Uh-huh.
risky as hell.
Yeah, yeah, it is.
Where would I go? I think as you were talking, my brain, I'll just go with my original thought, and I'm not sure what instance, but something about the Wild West seemed appealing. And there's so many times, like, is it King Arthur's court? And the problem is, there's what we were told history was at that time, and what it would be
Huh.
like when we actually got there.
That's
So I
true.
think, I don't know. I was thinking the Old West, but I'm also thinking like pivotal times. I don't know why this comes up, but like Lincoln giving a speech would be a cool time. And I don't know if it's just because there's so much a tumultuous world we live in to look at that time that was also very tumultuous. And as the country worked to come together, and I live in Canada, so I'm not even sure why that came up. But from a historical perspective, being in the audience for some of those original orators, whether it was Winston Churchill or Lincoln or these individuals, Martin Luther King, that moved groups of people with their words to be in those audiences and actually feel that. Like, I'm not a guy who goes to concerts. I'm not a super fan, but being in there when to watch the whole, like almost the crowd pulse as a whole because of the words that this individual was sharing, any of those kind of key moments in time, I think it would be pretty neat to be in the crowd and just to observe it.
So if anyone wants to tune into your podcast, get your books, reach out, hire you questions, any of the good business, where do they go?
TylerChisholm.com. It's a
Okay.
website that my team and I put together. I'm super proud of it. It's not a it's not a brochure. It's actually some legit content. We've got great articles on there. We got links to podcasts. If you want to connect with me for speaking, coaching, also just have a chat. If you haven't picked it up, Joe, I love talking. So
Yeah.
my wife always jokes, I do like the sound of my own voice. So anytime anyone wants to have a conversation, I'm happy to dive in. And as you know, the gift of even doing podcasts with people is what you learn and the experience you get to have. Like, it is a privilege every time.
It's amazing. Absolutely is. And this has been amazing. Tyler, thank you, sir. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your story. Best of luck with everything. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe, for having me on. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, you bet.